All right, guys. So now we're getting into our causes of World War I. Don't know why I keep thinking this too. Just being that, like, there's a lot of environmental causes that choices individual European states made that made a war extremely likely. And in the case of one isolated incident, the entire continent, then therefore the world goes to war because of the very immediate political realities of what's going on in continental Europe during the period. Okay, here's our vocab. And then it comes to, and there's only one. Oh my God, it's only one page of vocab, guys. Okay. So we're going to tell a quick story of the immediate causes of World War I. All of your WAP teachers our degrees are staked on our ability to talk about the causes of World War I. So both Mr. Rappaport, Mr. Jones, and I are prepared to talk about this. The inciting incident, the thing that causes World War I, is that the heir of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, Franz Ferdinand, is assassinated by a Bosnian Serb named Gavrilo Princip. Okay, that is like the event that occurs. And so we're going to break down a little bit why that happened. So first of all, Serb is one of the many ethnicities that make up the Balkans, which is this region of Southern Europe. Often you can say that most of Southern Europe makes up the Balkans, but that's not entirely inclusive, okay? There are a lot of ethnicities that make up the Balkans. The Serb ethnicity makes up a substantial number of those people, and Serbs are Orthodox Christian. The other major groups in the Balkans are groups like Bosnians, which are Muslims who converted to Islam during the Turkish occupation during the Ottoman period. You have Croats who actually speak and write the same language as Serbs, but are Catholic, and that has made them also a different culture. You have Albanians that are both Muslim and Christian. You have Bulgarians, Romanians, and Greeks. The Bosnians and the Serbs are what we're going to talk about. Okay, there's a region called Bosnia that was under the control of the Ottoman Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, that had Bosnians living in there and Serbs. The nation of Serbia is next to Bosnia. And Serbia believed that the places in Bosnia where Serbs lived belonged to Serbia. They called it a part of Greater Serbia. And as you kind of might guess already, Serbs believed a lot of people were Serbs, even if they didn't think they were Serbs, because they used that articulation, that argument, to justify a campaign of aggressive expansion across Southern Europe. So the Serbs thought that Bosnians were Serbs, some of them thought that Croats were Serbs, and of course, Serbs are Serbs, right? So Gavrilo Princip was a Serb who lived in Bosnia. And he believed that Bosnia should be a part of Serbia, the nation of Serbia. And he was a member of an organization known as the Black Hand, which was an insurgent organization inside of Bosnia funded by the Serbian military to destabilize Austro-Hungarian rule inside of Bosnia. The reason why Austro-Hungary has Bosnia, I can talk about at length at some other time. So when the heir of the Austro-Hungarian Empire is killed, Austria-Hungary goes, Serbia, you're always in the drama. You caused this. We need you to stop funding terrorists in Bosnia. Could you do that, please? As well as a variety of other ultimatums. Serbia is kind of like, we may have... what's the term? Girl boss too close to the sun. Or I hope, I'm trying to think these videos last for paternity, so I should stop using like these very immediate, or dated memes. Serbia said they bit off more than they could chew. But behind Serbia is the big old boy of Russia, because Russia is a Slavic nation and the Serbs are Slavic. And so through a nationalistic identity, Russia believed in supporting Serbia. So this massive nation of Russia is behind Serbia saying, go on, Serbia, you don't have to be bossed around. Now, Russia is allied with France because both Russia and France are threatened by the nation of Germany, because Germany is an industrialized nation that is very, very powerful and has interests that are in conflict with Russia and France. So Germany is in this pickle because they're allies with Austria-Hungary, and they think that Serbia is in the wrong here, but Russia is protecting Serbia. And Germany also thinks, well, we have to take on Russia sometime, so why not take on Russia when, at this moment? But also Germany knows that if they're going to fight a war with Russia, they have to fight a war with France. And if they fight a war with France, they're going to be fighting a two-front war, a war on both sides of their country. And their plan for getting around that is defeating one of these countries really quickly. And the country they think they can defeat really quickly is France. France is smaller. France had lost a war against Germany in the relatively recent future in 1870. And so what they tried to do is they developed a plan to cut through the nation of Belgium to invade France in a border that was not fortified. Because, of course, the French-German border was heavily fortified. When Germany cuts through Belgium, Great Britain has an alliance with Belgium and therefore feels compelled to join the war on the side of France and Russia. And so Great Britain joins to protect Belgium. And that is when by the time Great Britain joins the war, the world is pretty much at work. Because remember how big Britain is, remember how big France is. Germany has colonies too. Russia is the largest country in the world. And so it's big now. Okay, so that is how World War I goes down in July and August of 1914. But how did we get here? The acronym that AP World goes with is MAIN, which is Militarism, Alliances, Imperialism, and Nationalism. I am partial to the acronym MEAN, which is the same words except expansionism instead of imperialism. And I'll talk about that when we get to that letter. But these are like the concepts that defined European politics that enabled the environment for an assassination to lead to global war. Okay? The first concept is militarism. And militarism manifests in two ways. First is a cultural kind of militarism where a people emphasize or like honor or believe in the concept of having a strong military and giving a military a lot of influence in like the culture and society, right? So the idea of like respect our veterans and give veterans like, this much off, like that's cultural militarism, right? And that in of itself is benign, right? In a lot of ways, like in America, we have those kind of elements of militarism as well, right? Where we like to culturally emphasize and honor people who serve in the militaries of our nation, right? In the parts of the wings of the military of our nation, right? So that is, the nations all believed that like the military was important, okay? Now, the next thing to talk about would be a political kind of militarism where the military has influence in the policy decisions of a nation. And this can be a little bit more dangerous, right? Where the military has influence in determining domestic policy. The thing is, the military exists for one purpose, right? It is to impose, I'm going to say impose, right? That's not the right word. It is to defend and impose the interests of the nation through arms, right? Through violence, right? That's the purpose of the military. It's to protect us from violence and also can be used to advance a nation's interests through violence, right? So when a state becomes influenced in its policy decisions by having a highly influential military, a nation that does that is inclined to use war to solve their problems, right? And what happens in all these nations is the militaries become extremely influential, which means that they are more inclined to use war to solve problems instead of like other means like diplomacy, right? Now, also what happens while these nations are emphasizing the militaries more and more, other nations who are enemies or adversaries of the nations who are preparing for war become threatened and therefore invest in their own militaries, which threaten the original nations, which invest in their militaries, which creates a feedback loop known as an arms race, okay? The next main theme are alliances. So alliances are another way a nation can expand their political power, or their military power, right? That if when you have other nation's military on your side, when you go to war, you have this other nation's resources at your disposal, right? The problem was that a lot of these alliances were secret. They were not public knowledge. So no one knew, essentially, when Franz Ferdinand was killed, what was the nature of all these alliances? Like, was Germany entitled to defend Austria-Hungary in this case? Was Russia going to defend Serbia? No one knew what to do, and so they guessed, and they guessed in a way that led to a global conflict. And our two sides of the war are the Triple Entente, known as the Allies, and eventually the Triple Alliance, which were also known as the Central Powers. I don't think the use triple is all that helpful because they are in this both of them. So I would defer to using Entente, because eventually more than 3 nations are a part of the Entente, and the Central Powers, because they were the Austria-Hungary and Germany, which were the primary members of it, were in the Central Europe. Okay, the Ottomans eventually joined the Central Powers as well. We talked about that in the previous video. Now, imperialism and expansionism are the third long-term cause. And this again goes into power, that a nation's acquisition of territory is equivocal to power. It's equivocal to like when you own territory, you can use that territory to produce resources, to raise a population that can defend you. So territory, manifests in all the kinds of power a state would find desirable, okay? So states want to expand because they want to increase their power base. However, at this point in the early 20th century, the easy places to expand into were gone. There was no other place left except places that already had been claimed by other European states. So remember, throughout the 19th century, these European nations are getting along because there was enough for everyone, right? Because they could beat up on all the black people in Africa, all the Asian people, everyone like that. And then, now that that was done, the only people to fight were other European states. That's the only means of expansion a nation had left to them. And nations kind of need to expand to justify the expansion of their economies and enable the expansion of their economies as well, right? As a consequence of industrialization and a consequence of capitalism. So the nations of Germany and Italy are newer nations. They come later to the party, which means they don't have bigger empires, but they desire bigger empires and look for places to expand, vulnerable places to expand. So like, for example, Italy fights a war with the Ottoman Empire to take the territory of Libya from them. When World War I ends, a lot of the territory Italy gets at first is from the Ottoman Empire and Anatolia. The final main theme we're talking about is nationalism. And this is kind of another overlap. These all kind of feed into each other. But nationalism is trying to prove the strength of the nation. And war was perceived as the most direct means of doing so. So like nations that were established desired to prove their greatness by winning a war. However, another important theme is something we talked about in the Gavrilo Princip slide, the immediate causes, that subject peoples like Bosnian Serbs, like Arabs in the Ottoman Empire, like Armenians in the Ottoman Empire, sought independence in their own means of determining their government. And the war gives all these different groups the opportunity to strive for that independence and that autonomy. So that is C. And then the big consequence of the war, I don't know why it's here instead of at the end of the last chapter, is that the biggest important thing about World War I is that the resources European states invest in fighting the war is what inevitably leads to the decline of the European empires that were established in the 18th and 19th centuries. There is not an event in the 20th century that is not connected in some way to World War I. Like the world as we know today is defined by World War I. And one of the most important attributes of World War I is that it is war at its most deadly in many ways. In all of the manifestations you can think about how war is deadly, World War I is a massively destructive conflict. So that's 7.2. And we have one more to get through. And hopefully I can keep this under 15 minutes.